Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode we have another question submitted by Caleb Ferreira. It says, while you're working on analytics, CJ Mosley, a young off-ball and inside linebacker with less name recognition. I'm assuming, hey, could you do a CJ Mosley analytics profile? And yeah, let's do a CJ Mosley analytics profile. Haven't done a lot of off-ball linebackers. Of course, I recently did the Luke Kuechly one. And I figured CJ Mosley is a good place to start with because there's lots of people who pose the question of, well, isn't solo tackle market share inconsistent? Like if you're on a really great football team like Alabama, wouldn't that kind of lower your solo tackle market share? And a lot of people ask me about CJ Mosley going, well, how did CJ Mosley do? You know, he was on a great Alabama team. And CJ Mosley performed really well in terms of solo tackle market share. And he did have a couple negatives, not a lot, but a couple that I'll get into, which again, don't kill me, don't shoot the messenger. But there was a few things that were kind of, negatives. But for the most part, he had a very good profile, and particularly his production was probably his best sort of view of him was his solo tackle market share production. With those that aren't familiar with my work, the terms I'm going to be mentioning today is defensive market share production, which is specifically solo tackle market share production, which solo tackle market share is simply this. You take an individual defensive statistic, in this case solo tackles, you divide it by the team total. So essentially, if a linebacker has 50 solo tackles on a team that has 500 solo tackles, then that linebacker had 10% solo tackle market share. But what you do with that number is you take that number and you compare it to every single linebacker performance. This is the 1996 NFL draft class, which with my data is about 1,000 plus. And then you're able to kind of see, okay, this is average solo tackle market share, this is above average solo tackle market share, and on top of that, you're able to see where the breakpoints are in terms of high quality outcomes when it comes to solo tackle market share. So that is probably one of the bigger sort of metrics I have when it comes to off-ball and pursuit linebacker positions, in terms of if you're going to be a good off-ball linebacker, at least a consistently good off-ball linebacker, you better perform well in terms of this metric. That's really all I'm going to say. And then, of course, athleticism data, which is the explosive lower body strength score, which is the vertical and broad jump measured against mass density, the speed score, which is the 40-yard dash measured against mass density, and then the flexibility score, which is the short shuttle/street cone measured against mass density. With all that stuff out of the way, let's get to CJ Mosley in terms of what he looked like in college, what he looked like in terms of athleticism, and then, of course, how his NFL career has been up to this point in terms of his production. So starting with CJ Mosley's production, he had a 93.46 solo tackle market share production score coming out of Alabama. Based on my data that hits the All-Pro threshold and Pro Bowl threshold, 100% of multiple All-Pro linebackers since the 1996 NFL draft class hit at least 90% or higher in terms of solo tackle market share, and 100% of Pro Bowl linebackers hit at least 77 or higher in terms of solo tackle market share production. And when I say 100%, I mean 100%. I've not seen outliers in terms of guys who don't hit these points and become great pursuit linebackers. It just hasn't happened. There's definitely been starters, don't get me wrong, and there's nothing wrong with being a starter. It's just when it comes to high quality outcomes, the Ray Lewis's, the Luke Kuechlys, those types of guys, they're usually 90 percentile plus or better. In CJ Mosley's case, it's really good to see a guy like him hit that sort of mark, and kind of discredits a lot of that stuff that people say that, well, he was on a championship team, so wouldn't that affect his solo tackle market share? And my biggest counter to that, if anybody tells you, well, he was on a great team, that's why he wasn't productive, then if a guy's on a great team and can't be productive, then how is he going to be productive in the NFL? I mean, that's my main sort of comment, because there have been teams that run national championship teams, like Andre Johnson or Sean Taylor or Ed Reed or all these other sort of guys that played at Miami that were on these national championship teams. They hit the production markers they should have hit. All those guys did. Ray Lewis was on a fairly great football team and still had ridiculously high solo tackle market share production. So I don't want to bring up all the Miami guys, but I'm just saying that whenever people make that argument that, well, the team is affecting their production, I just don't agree with that. There isn't a lot of data. Like you'd have to have a test case. You'd have to have an outlier to kind of make that case. And I have not found a guy like that. So it's kind of hard to make that argument when you don't actually have any examples of that, is all I'm trying to say. And then, of course, when you get to athleticism with C.J. Mosley, this was the only area of concern with him coming out. He had a 43.19 explosive lower body strength score, a 68.55 speed score, and a 40.12 flexibility score. Based on my data since 1999, again 1999 because that's as far back as my athleticism data goes, 100% of multiple All-Pro linebackers had 83.15 or higher, 77.27 or higher, and 77.27 in terms of flexibility or higher. And Mosley does not hit the explosiveness, the speed, or the flexibility score in terms of them. But not only that, when it comes to Pro Bowl linebackers, thresholds there are 65, 64.08, and 61.21. And Mosley had a 43.19 explosive lower body strength score and a 40.12 flexibility score. So the only Pro Bowl threshold he actually hit was his speed. And he does hit the starter thresholds in terms of long-term starters. But this is the only area of concern that C.J. Mosley had coming out of college, was the fact that he just did not have Pro Bowl athleticism from previous Pro Bowl linebackers. Again, every single Pro Bowl linebacker hit at least this score in terms of explosiveness, hit at least this score in terms of flexibility. So in that way, if C.J. Mosley was to become a 3-time Pro Bowl linebacker, which so far he has 2 Pro Bowls, but if he was to become a 3 Pro Bowl linebacker, he would technically be an outlier because he falls outside of the realm of athleticism. So in that way, C.J. Mosley, coming out of college, his production was perfect. His solo tackle market share was perfect, but his athleticism data disagreed with the assessment that he was going to become a multiple All-Pro or multiple Pro Bowl type of pass rusher. So far, he's only been a Pro Bowl linebacker. That's pretty much what he's been in terms of off-ball pursuit linebackers. He's only been a Pro Bowler. However, that is the only sort of issue with him, is just that his athleticism disagrees with the sort of slam dunk assumption that, hey, he's going to be a special linebacker in terms of, multiple All-Pro or multiple Pro Bowl. And again, 3 Pro Bowls or more is what that threshold is. And if he does become a 3-time Pro Bowler, it's not a big deal. I mean, it's just that if another player like this comes up, who has a very good speed score but not so great explosiveness and flexibility score, then you could make that case for that player that this is a guy that could be the next C.J. Mosley. Like that's all that really means. It's just that based on the past data since 1989, there has never been a linebacker to hit multiple Pro Bowls with this sort of profile. So it's not the biggest deal in the world. It's just is what it is in terms of his profile. He looked more like a long-term starter than he did a multiple All-Pro player. Then when we get to his NFL production, this is where he's been pretty good. In 2014, he had a 99.11 total impact score, which is very good. I mean, that is essentially like Luke Kuechly level total impact. 2015 had a 94.56 total impact score. And then in 2016 had a 88.59 total impact score. So his impact has kind of dropped a bit as he's gotten older. He had 2 very good seasons in 2014 to 2015 with kind of a lower end year in 2016. I don't really think this is indicative of anything. I haven't looked into like if he had any injuries or anything like that during that time span, which maybe he did, maybe he didn't. You can maybe leave a comment below. But his production is fine. I mean, he pretty much is having the impact indicative of a guy that hit, again, 93 plus percentile solo tackle market share in college. So it shouldn't be surprising that a guy that hits that level of production and also has a athleticism trait that is Pro Bowl level. You know, his speed score was Pro Bowl threshold. It wouldn't be surprising for a guy that has that production with one Pro Bowl athleticism trait to turn in a career where he goes to multiple Pro Bowls or has this type of impact. Like, it wouldn't be that surprising. But the bottom line is his production's been very good. The only year where it kind of took a dip was 2016. But overall, it's pretty decent. I mean, it's pretty decent production for him overall in terms of his NFL career up to this point. So in conclusion about CJ Mosley, I think the biggest things that we can take away is that he is a linebacker that had the production, basically had high-end production in terms of his solo tackle market share coming out of college. He's turned that production into high-end production at the NFL level. And the only sort of question marks were his athleticism. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me if he becomes a three-time Pro Bowl player. That doesn't really change much other than the fact that he becomes a test case for the future, especially sort of a test case for whether or not it's about a linebacker having at least one above-average trait in terms of athleticism or having all-around great athleticism. Up to this point, based on the data, all-around athleticism is kind of the preferred stance when it comes to data. If you're going to be an all-pro linebacker, if you're going to be a Pro Bowl linebacker, all those guys had great all-around athleticism. They didn't just have one athleticism trait that was above average and then everything else was kind of meh. But I think CJ Mosley is a good case. I mean, he's a good case. He was a prospect that had a good profile coming out in terms of his production, and I think there's a lot of things you can learn from this type of player. Again, and more specifically, it just shows again why solo tackle market share data in itself is really good and should be paid attention to, because more often than not, even players who don't really test the best as athletes, if they have really good solo tackle market share, it's indicative of what they were as a player. That they were still able to produce at a high level, despite having sort of below average athleticism in certain aspects of their game, and they're able to translate to the NFL. I just further validates the importance of solo tackle market share. That if you test it against athleticism, because again, everybody puts so much stock into athleticism testing, but in this particular case, the production, the solo tackle market share data in particular, won out over athleticism, at least in this case, in terms of his overall impact in the NFL. So again, I think this is a good sort of case to revisit in the future if another linebacker puts up this type of profile. I think it's a good sort of place to start if you're looking at that type of player. So again, my name is James Coburn. You can find my work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. In terms of all the work I've done in the past is pretty much on there. You can also find me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.